Hey there. I'm excited to announce this to you today. This is what you've been waiting for in your spiritual quest. This is something I've wanted to do for a long time, and I'm finally ready to announce it that it's ready to go. It's the Grief to Growth Community Circle. Now, this is a sanctuary where like-minded souls are united in their journey through grief and towards personal transformation. It's more than just a place. It's a beginning. It's a commitment to growth and understanding. Here you're finding not just a community, but you're entering a circle of trust and depth. You're going to engage with interactive coursework. You'll dive into exclusive podcast episodes and partake in discussions that illuminate the path from mourning to empowerment. This is a realm where every question is honored and every individual's journey is validated. To be part of this exclusive circle, visit us at grieftogrowth.com/community or look for the chat icon at the bottom of every page on the main website. Remember that entry is a privilege because I want to ensure that every member is as dedicated and genuine as you are. You must apply to join, but the journey within is worth every step. So go ahead and join us today. Check it out, grieftogrowth.com/community, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Hi there. Welcome to the Grief to Growth podcast. Your host is Brian Smith, spiritual seeker, grief survivor, and life coach. Brian believes that the worst tragedies of life provide the greatest opportunity for growth. Brian says he was planted, not buried, and he's here to help you grow where you've been planted. In each episode, Brian and his guests will share what has helped them to survive and thrive. His sincere hope is that this episode helps you today.
And now, a brief word from our sponsor. When I decided I was going to do a podcast, I knew there were more moving parts than most people expect. How do you record a podcast? Where do you host it? How much will it cost? Do I need special software? How do I distribute it? All these questions were in my mind. I was all set to go with another podcast hosting company. Then I heard about Anchor. I believe that Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place. You can use it right from your phone or from your computer. Anchor is not only free, you can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Anchor's creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds great. They'll even distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. So download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's Anchor, ANCHOR.FM as in FM radio. And now, back to our episode. Today's episode of Grief to Growth features a new friend of mine, Lindsay McKinnon. I met Lindsay a few weeks ago through a mutual friend who thought we might have a common connection because we're both shining light parents, and we're both working on healing and trying to help other people heal. Lindsay is a life coach, a massage therapist, a Qoya teacher, an equine therapist, etc. Her two sons passed in a house fire about 3 years ago, and Lindsay's been, of course, on a journey since then and made some incredible strides. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hey, everybody. This is Brian Smith, your host of Grief to Growth. I'm back today with another episode, and today I have with me Lindsay McKinnon. Lindsay is a fellow Shining Light parent. She is a coach. She is a body movement instructor. Her website is soulbodyconnect.com. We're going to talk about her website and some of the things she's doing. She's got a free gift she'd like to offer if you visit the website. So with that, I want to say welcome, Lindsay. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Brian.
Yeah, we just met a couple of weeks ago through a mutual friend, and you and I had a conversation, and I felt like we have a lot in common. I think you have a lot that people in my audience would like to hear. Your story, I think, is very inspirational, how you've overcome, I hate to say the ultimate tragedy, but I think for people who've lost children or who've had children transition, I hate the word lost. It is, it's about as bad as we can imagine. So whenever I meet someone who is moving forward with that, I like to have a conversation with them. So maybe you could tell us the story of, how you kind of got to where you are.
Oh gosh. How much time do we have? Just an hour? Oh, wow. How did I get from, I just I am embraced it, really. I embraced it and dove really deep. I was gifted, and I'll even go so far as to say privileged, with the time and funds to float us so that we could coast, so that we didn't have to get right back to job.
Yeah.
And we could really go deep into our grief and work it. And I did a lot of traveling. I worked a lot with animals. I had incredible encounters, grief therapy, talk therapy, EMDR, embodiment practices was a huge piece of my healing. There's really nothing that I haven't done. Just
So,
yeah.
Just backtracking a little bit, tell us what happened with your boys.
Yeah, March 19th, 2016, we were hosting some friends from out of town, and we survived a tragic house fire that night, and nobody knows how it started. There was not enough evidence left behind for the fire marshals to figure that out. Everything. The number of items that we could actually salvage from that fire, I could count on one hand. So in that fire, we lost our boys. Everybody else was able to get out, and it was not for a lack of trying to get the boys.
Sure.
The fire just literally pushed us all out. And it was tragic. And it was not only tragic and traumatic for me, but for an entire community, an entire town, because we were really invested in our community here in Roanoke. And so I knew early on, even that night, I knew that in order for me to heal this, that I had to take others with me, because it was so profound and it had such a ripple effect in our community. I had to be transparent with my healing process so that others could also know what is possible for them as well. So I took that very, very seriously.
Yeah. Well, when we do these, we talk to people, we talk about how our children transition, but I want to talk about your boys, how they lived, or how they are, they're still alive. Their names, their ages, tell me about them.
Yeah. Well, Patrick was 10, and Patrick had just turned 10 a month before, and Logan was about to turn 6 a month after the fire. Okay. And I've got a picture of them right behind me on the wall right there.
Wow.
And they are...
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
That's okay. Life happens. They're just incredibly vibrant, energetic souls. They loved music. They loved to dance. They loved to make up their own words by meshing two words together.
Yeah.
And they were funny. They were very active, whether it was swimming or soccer or gymnastics. They just were very social among not only their peers, but with adults too.
Yeah.
We loved going to music festivals and camping and spending time outdoors. They were just incredible, vibrant boys, all boys.
Yeah. Well, it sounds a lot like my girls. They were about 3 years apart, and I could tell by that picture. I mean, you can just see the relationship between the two of them.
Oh, they were very close. They did everything together. They practically shared a brain.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And you have other children. You have another child now since then, right?
Yeah. So a year and a half after the fire, we were surprised with a pregnancy that we were not expecting. And being an older parent is quite a pilgrimage, I should say, in and of itself. And I love it. Her name is Trinity Acadia, and she's a feisty redhead that's also vibrant, and she's got a lot of grit to her as well. Like, she falls down and it doesn't faze her at all. She just gets up and keeps going.
Yeah, it's great. So So after the fire, the tragedy, you got right back into life, and you got really actively involved with your own healing.
Yeah.
As you said, it sounds like you've gone through several modalities. At what point did you kind of transition from healing yourself to starting to look outward to help other people?
I know exactly. Well, even in the midst of the fire, how I experienced that fire, it was like a transcendent experience, and I could. It's wild to say and it's wild to hear, but I was parenting my boys through their transition because I understood. I was very clear as to what was going on. It was a very one of those awakening moments that happens very quickly. And even in the hospital, when we landed in the trauma unit and then were transferred to another hospital 2 hours away that happened to be in my hometown that I grew up in, a mile away from my mom's house.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there were just so many things. Gosh, I'm losing track. My thoughts are going all over the place all of a sudden.
Yeah.
But I knew that this was a massive experience. And 3 months later, after the fire, I ended up in an equine horse therapy program for 8 weeks in a row, along with some of my women friends here in town. We all went to the horses together because we're all parenting. Well, I was parenting in a different way, right? Mm-hmm. But they were parenting their children's grief for having lost their classmate and their friend.
Yeah.
And how do you hold space for parents who are also navigating their grief and trying to parent their children's grief? It's just, it was nothing short of epic in the full sense of the word.
Yeah.
And so I had this incredible encounter with a horse one day, and it was an otherworldly experience. This horse was pacing very quickly around the ring and reminded me of my son Patrick. And all I wanted to do was help this horse calm down and help it find some peace. And I walked over to it. It did not want me around. It charged at me. It circled me very quickly. And the more I stood just still and kind of speaking to it from my heart, it started slowing down and it laid down right in front of me. I didn't grow up with horses. I know nothing about them. And to have such a magical creature lay down in front of me, it made me drop to my hands and knees. And I crawled over to it, and in this exchange, I felt my boys with me. And I felt like I was holding them just like I did at nighttime when we said our nighttime prayers. And it was huge. And that was the moment I knew that I could still have a relationship with my children beyond the veil.
Yeah.
But that was the moment that it was a physical experience for me, a visceral experience for me. And what I realized in that moment was when the horse stepped away and that moment was over, I realized that there were so many other people in that same field and other horses. And that was the moment that I was like, okay, it's not just me. It's not just about what I lost and my grief. It is about all of our grief that we are trying to lean into and figure out our next right steps, figure out how to find ourselves, locate ourselves, much less integrate it into a functioning life, much less a thriving life, right?
Yeah.
So I knew my boys wanted me to thrive because that's what we did best together was thrive. And I knew that they wanted that for me still.
You touched on so much there. I want to go back and kind of bring some of those things out. I mean, You talked about the impact on the community. And I think a lot of times we underestimate the impact our children have on the community around them. My daughter was 15 when she transitioned. Your boys being, 10 and said almost 6.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter's friends going through it at 15, they're one of their first experiences with death that's not supposed to happen at that age. I can only imagine how that happens to a 10-year-old or a 6-year-old classmate. And those parents trying to go through it. So when a child is lost, it ripples through the whole community.
Yes.
And I think the fact that you recognize that is very important.
Yes.
I hear a lot of parents say, well, I don't get signs. I've never gotten signs. What kind of signs have you gotten? And I hear you, with the horse, you were open to an experience that someone could say, well, that's just a horse being a horse. But you saw beyond, the obvious thing of the horse and had a connection with your boys through that. And I want to tell people, look for those types of things, animal behavior, because our children don't become the animal, but somehow it seems like they come through, they connect, they merge, whatever you want to call it.
It's like a portal, like a threshold that you step through, and these animals or situations, it could be a song coming through the radio.
Yeah.
It's like they're metaphors, really.
Yeah, exactly.
They can use anything as a tool in order to reach through to us.
Yeah. Shayna had a song. Well, there was a song that came out right before she transitioned, and we played it at her service, and it kind of became our song, and it's been 4 years now. So at the time, you hear it every once in a while, but of course, over 4 years, you hear it less and less. But it becomes more special now. My wife walks in the other day and says, they were playing Shayna's song on the radio, and we don't know how this works, but for you to be in the place at the time when it's being played and to make that connection and it connects you to them, I believe there's something to that.
Absolutely. And I think also I laid that groundwork as far as being spiritually open, energetically open, well before the fire. And it was also a constant conversation between my boys and I. They had grown up going to funerals because there were 8 family members that had passed in their short life. And so going to so many funerals, answering their questions, which is the crises of consciousness type of questions that little kids are not afraid to ask, right?
Right.
Those were a constant dialogue. Even in the 3 miles distance from between our house and the school carpool drop-off line, we would have these incredibly deep conversations about grandpa passing, or their great grandparents passing, or my stepfather passing. And because of that, it kind of made I'm just going to a metaphor now, but it made the soil really rich.
Yeah.
In order for me to continue to have those experiences and conversations post-fire.
So what were you telling the boys about what death is, and what was their understanding at that age?
Their understanding was that death was a transition. And there's a memory that I have. It was the weekend. It was in the fall of 2015. So 6 months before our fire. I was putting the boys down to sleep, and I thought Patrick was already asleep. And he all of a sudden shoots out of bed and sits straight up and looks at me right in the face. And it startled me because I thought he was asleep. Mm-hmm. And he said, "Mommy, time and space are just an illusion. I want you to remember that when you're sad." Wow. And I looked at him and I was like, "Okay, buddy, thank you." Wow. And he lay right back down and he went back to sleep. He had no idea that the very next morning my grandfather was literally transitioning. states away. We live in Virginia, and my grandfather was in Pennsylvania. And the next morning, I was taking them to school and then continuing to drive up to Pennsylvania to help my grandfather transition.
Wow.
And they're just profound words coming through the mouth of a then 9-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And so they understood that these bodies that we live in, these earthly bodies, are temporary. And they understood that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And sometimes it hurts like hell.
Yeah.
You know?
It's amazing. And I've talked to other parents, and some people say, well, sometimes we get premonitions. Our kids have premonitions. They're going to transition earlier. And when we look back, Shayna did say some things actually just a few weeks before she passed. She passed on June 24th, on Mother's Day. She was playing with her cousins we were up in Columbus, it's 2 hours from here, and we're with my family. And she said, when I die, I want to be cremated and buried under a tree. And we didn't know this. So after she had transitioned a few weeks later, we were trying to make a decision on what to do with the remains. And we were going to talk to my other daughter about it. So my wife and I decided to have her body cremated. And we said, Kayla, are you okay with that? And she said, yeah. And she tells us a story that Shayna had said a few weeks before. We're like, well, why would she say that? Were you talking about this? Were you talking? And she said, no, we don't. Shayna was just weird. We don't know why why she said this at this time. So sometimes when we look back, we can get those kind of indications. And when you were telling that story, I got goosebumps all over for a kid to sit up and say something like that. And it's one of those things, I think it's a seed that's kind of planted that when we look back, it brings us comfort. I know for me it does. To think.
Yeah.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, something I want to tell you about today. My podcast platform, Buzzsprout, has recently made it easier for me to allow you to support me financially. Go to www.grieftogrowth.com/subscribe. That's grief2growth.com/subscribe. And once you're there, you can sign up to support me financially. Now, you can do it for as little as $3 a month, or of course, as much as you'd like. If you do that, you'll get access to bonus episodes, and you'll see those in the regular feed. They'll have a lock on them. But when you become a subscriber, you'll actually get access to your own private feed, and you'll be able to listen to the regular podcast along with the bonus podcast for the subscribers. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for sharing the podcast. And I want to thank those of you who support me financially. Have a great day, and on to the episode.
Yeah. And there's so many stories, Brian. It's unbelievable. This is why I'm writing this book. I hope I can finish it this winter. Because there are just so many stories that are similar to that. Also that fall with Patrick, he had been really having a lot of trouble with anxiety. And at that point, I'm a massage therapist and a childbirth doula. And so working with all kinds of modalities is kind of my thing. And I was helping him learn how to anchor his anxiety. And we use all kinds of body workers and energy workers. And he would say to me, he would like grab his head and squeeze his hair through his fingers. And he would say things like, I just feel like I'm coming out of my body. I don't know where I am. I'm coming out of my skin. And again, looking back, it's like, wow, yeah, somewhere deep inside of his soul, he knew.
Yeah.
And that is probably one of the hardest things to accept. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, again, talking to all the parents that I talked to, and everybody thinks their child is special. So, I mean, first of all, we got to put that out there.
Yeah.
But there's something that it seems like our kids have in common. A lot of these kids that transition early, there's something in common. They don't quite fit into this world. They look at things differently. They say these profound things out of nowhere. I've got a picture on my desktop now when Shayna was 2 years old, these giant Legos, and she's building this tower. It's literally above her head. And I remember when I took this picture, I said to my wife, I said, I hope she uses her powers for good and not for evil, because this child is going to be a force. Yeah. And literally the day she was born, the hospital, the nurses are like, there's something about the way she cries that you can just tell she's just going to be a force.
Oof, I just got goosebumps.
Yeah, that's just the way she always was, and the way she kind of went through life. I think people, that are like our kids and maybe even like us a little bit, we have trouble fitting into the world sometimes. So I think a lot of times we do suffer with anxiety and depression because it's like, this is not the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
So I think when you tell me this, I feel like I already know your kids. I mean, I just feel like I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's hard to, our culture wants everything and everyone and every idea and concept to fit into a nice little box. And that's just not real. It's not real.
Yeah. And the other thing that I'm learning is I'm an engineer, and I was raised in a family where I was scarred by religion early. So I thought the universe was out to get me, God was out to get me and stuff like that. And then I became like, well, the universe it's not caring. Maybe it's not out to get me, but it just doesn't care. It's all random. But there's more and more, there's magical stuff in the universe. All these things that happen, these synchronicities, these stories, it's not just a random thing, and if you open your eyes to it, then they just start to multiply, it seems like.
Yeah. Yeah. I forget who it was that originally said, that which you put your attention on grows, right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking for the possibilities, you're going to find the possibilities, right?
Yeah.
They can just illumine a situation or an experience or an idea or your entire life. But if you're looking for the negative side of things, then you're going to find that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you feel like, and this is a leading question, but do you feel like you and your boys planned this, what you've got going on, or how do you feel about
what I have going on now with Soul Body?
About them transitioning early, about them transitioning the way they did?
Oh my gosh, I write about this in my book and I haven't spoken about it very much. Yes and no. Yes and no. I really believe with all my heart that before we're even born, that we have these contracts with spirit, with God, with goddess, whatever the lens is, that makes most sense to each individual. And we become unconscious of those contracts when we're living on this earth and things happen. And I think our job and our purpose on this earth is to remember what those contracts are and to remember where we come from. And we come from a state of love and a state of just exchange, so somehow I do believe that before I was born, I signed up for this life. And before the boys were born, they signed up for this life too. And I think it was just a week after the boys' memorial service, which was like a huge love festival. It was unlike any other memorial service. It was outside at a camp and not inside of four walls. And there was all kinds of activities happening and kids swimming in ponds and making all kinds of banners and handprints all over the place. It was just magical. It was a kid's wonder world. It was a celebration of life. But about a week after that, because of being a Qoya teacher, I listened to music in a different way. Qoya taught me how to listen to music and use it as a tool to listen more deeply to my internal dialogue and to a spiritual dialogue that's even deeper than my dialogue. And through Qoya, you get to explore that in your body. But my husband Tom and I were watching a movie, and right now I can't remember the title of the movie. Robert Redford was in it, and it was based on a Bill Bryson book, A Walk in the Woods. And the theme song was trailing through the movie, just the music, not the words. But because of Qoya, that song just really got to me. And I'm like, what is this song? I have to know this song. I have to know this song. And I watched the credits. And at this point, my husband had fallen asleep on the couch, and it was just me up. And I saw the title of the song, the name of the musicians. I Googled it, downloaded it, and it was called Brother. And it was a Lord Huron song. And in the lyrics, it's all about how there's a fire coming, and these brothers make a pact together that they will walk through the fire together.
Wow.
That they don't understand what's going to happen, but they know that something big is about to happen, and that they make a pact to walk through the fire together.
That's the lyrics of the song?
That's the lyrics of the song.
Wow.
And I swell in tears just thinking about it. And I write about it in my book because that, again, is just yet another affirmation that we're here, we understand, we're still with you, and we're processing through this together as hard as it is.
Yeah.
And we knew.
Yeah.
And we knew without knowing, really.
Yeah. I call those things Easter eggs. Shane and I love to play games. So I look at the gaming analogy works for me in so many ways, as far as like, we go through this life, we level up. So I think leveling up is part of it. Facing the boss at the end of each level is another metaphor that I like to use. We have multiple lives. We play Mario Brothers. Shayna was the best person in the house. So Shayna always had at least 99 lives in Mario Brothers. So she would just throw her life away. It didn't matter. But there's this thing in gaming called Easter eggs, where the programmers will put little things in the game that are just kind of out of the ordinary for you to find. And I feel like when we're here, like you said, we forget why we're here, but we do have these little Easter eggs, these little things like that. And I've got stories of Kayla and Shayna and dreams and animals behaving strangely and things like that. It's just these little reminders that say, it's okay. You're in a game. It's all a simulation. It's under control. It's going to be okay. So this is just a little reminder, kind of just to get you through.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi there. I'm really excited to tell you about my latest ebook. It's 4 lessons that you can learn from the near-death experience without going through all the trouble of dying to learn them. I've been studying NDEs for several years now. I am completely convinced that not only are they 100% real, but that there's some very universal wisdom that we can get from the near-death experience. And I've distilled that down in this book into 4 short lessons. And I've also given you all the reasons why I believe that NDEs are absolutely real. So go to www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons to pick it up for free. www.grieftogrowth.com/NDE lessons. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah. Those Easter eggs are so important. They're like cairns on the path, it's like, okay, here. Okay, you're on the right path. Okay, I'm still here. It's just, they're incredible. And it's almost like I live for them. Like they are my guides and directing my actions these days. I wake up every morning, and before I even put my feet on the floor, I'm already asking, okay, boys, where am I going to see you today?
Yeah.
Where are you going to show up with your baby sister?
Yeah.
I need a lot of help with her.
And I like that. I love that too, that, there's still, as you said, an active part of your life that, every day before you go. You talked about parenting them through their transition, which is really a fascinating concept. But the fact that they're now helping you and motivating you and guiding you and inspiring you. Yeah.
There's a beautiful poem by John O'Donohue that talks about children passing and how they become the parents to our soul. Mm-hmm. Even though we parented them, they become the ones that parent us. And it's that flip-flop. It's just, it's wild and weird and awesome and like filled with awe, like the original meaning of that word too, just you can't wrap your head around, you can't think about it analytically, it trips up all of our triggers and synapses. So you have to bring new language and new experience to these things, because what we were taught all of a sudden doesn't make sense.
Right.
You
Right.
have to learn new skills. You have to practice new consciousness. And sometimes it's uncomfortable, and you have to be willing to sit with the discomfort of it all.
Yeah, it's a big shift. And when I talk to parents and we talk about some of these concepts, and they're like, well, how do I get there? And it's like, it's not easy. It's a constant thing. It's an ongoing thing. There's, as you said, there's all these new concepts. Like after Shayna passed, that's the first time I heard about soul planning. And someone came to me and said, "Oh, yeah, you probably."
I want to hear more about that. That's really cool.
Soul planning. Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like it's what like you said. You've got these contracts. I don't really like the word contract, because that makes it sound like it's an obligation that I. But I think we have agreements. I like the word agreement better.
Yeah.
I think we have agreements that these are the high points we're going to hit. These are things we're going to do. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because there's always this debate about free will versus, predetermination, and is it one or the other? And I'm starting to believe that most things where we have an either or choice, it's some form of both.
Yeah.
And I have a really good friend I work with helping parents heal, Sarah Rubel, who believes in soul planning, and it's just like it's all planned. It's all planned. But what she and I have come to agreement on is there's free will before we come in. And I was interviewing someone yesterday, and he was telling me he had this reading where that's like your life is going to be like boom, 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 boom. And the people who did the reading it's called a nadi palm reading. So it's an Indian thing. They said some people have more free will in their lives than others. You don't. You planned this because you chose this. He's kind of I would call him a bodhisattva. It's not the word he used, but he came here to serve other people. So his life was planned out, and there's really not much room for deviation.
Excuse me.
It's okay. So I've come to believe that, Shayna, and I blame Shayna because I could see her saying, this is what we're going to do. This is going to be fun. I'm going to come in, we have our kids late in life. So I'm going to come in late, I'll be the last one in. I'm going to be there for 15 years, and then I'm going to go out, and you guys will, carry on. And so I blame her. But I do, it's funny because the first time someone said to me, well, Shayna's kind of your guide now. I'm like, but Shayna's my child. She was 15. But that's from a human perspective, right? As far as our souls go, Shayna could be older than I am. We don't know those things. So there are a lot of shifts to be made. And I was talking to someone about soul planning just a couple of days ago, and we were talking about why do miscarriages happen? Why do things like that happen? I said, well, you can believe it's either just an accident, it's all random. You can believe that soul decided not to come in right now, or you can believe that it's planned. And they're like, well, I believe it's probably like some law was broken and it's a punishment. And I said, well, that doesn't work for me. I said that doesn't work for me because first of all, I don't believe in punishment. I don't believe that the universe or God or whatever punishes us for breaking laws. I said, secondly, why is not incarnating a punishment? That's not a punishment. Who's it a punishment for? So I'm like, that just doesn't make sense. So when it comes to soul planning, when people push back, I say, hey, I'm not trying to force this on you. If it doesn't work for you, that's fine. But for me, it actually does work. And what I can tell you is, okay, you've got this pain, right? So you can deal with it and say, I'm going to use it and transmute it into something for good. Or you can say, I'm just going to waddle in the pain and say the universe hates me or I have bad luck. And those are the choices that you have.
Yeah. And they're definitely choices. I have been to a lot of different kinds of grief groups and things of the like. And, on Facebook, a member of different kinds of groups of parents or mothers who have lost children. And I have a hard time participating in them because a lot of them, to me, feel toxic. And it just, when people And I feel like there's a time and a place for everything. So there was a time where I wallowed in it, and I felt the anger and the woe is me and the pity and all of that. And there are reasons why I needed to feel that. And I think it's because it gave me insight in order to be more compassionate to others. But what I decided and what I chose was that I didn't like how that made me feel. And I didn't like the results that it was creating in the ripple effect, not only for me, but to people around me, right? And so I really needed to switch that feeling and that dialogue and that thought process up, what we think we create, right? And so I had to transform it inside of myself so that I could create a nourishing space for others as well.
Yeah.
Because that's where you grow. That's where you grow.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, and I love the way you said that. And you know, you're right. There is a time for that, and I think we all go through that to some extent. And I still fall back into it. You know, I tell people, don't look at me and think, okay, I got it all figured out. It's not
right
at all.
Yeah.
But you know, there was a time. I remember people talked to me about healing a few weeks after Shana passed. I was like, I don't want to heal.
Yeah,
Yeah, I want to feel bad. I want to feel bad for the rest of my life. This is terrible.
Oh my gosh. A bottle of wine and Game of Thrones were like my best friends for a while. It was like, numb me out.
Yeah.
Because I am already feeling way more than what this bottle of wine and what Game of Thrones could make me feel. You know?
Yeah, and I think it's important to tell people that, you know, it's okay to go through that, but you don't want to stay there, you know, and it's not honoring our children to stay there. And you know, Shana is my biggest motivator, you know, because when she left, I wanted to go with her, and I'm like, okay, I'm just ready to go be with her. And I realized, but now I have to be here for her, and I have to be here for my wife, and for her sister as well, and now for other people. And I know that she's spurring me on, and she's like, okay, this is what you signed up for. You said you could do it, so let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like they can do more through us and with us, you know, as we are here saying yes and committing to just expanding more and more and being willing to stand in that spot, which is so freaking hard to stand in. You know, people say you're so strong and you're so inspirational, and thank you. And it is, some days I am not strong, and sometimes I am anything but inspirational, you know, and sometimes,
You talked about in your book, you're writing some things to say and not, or in your download, which we're going to talk about in a minute. There's things to say and not say. And I was like, okay, when you tell someone that they're strong, I know the sentiment you're trying to express, but what you're doing is you're not giving them permission to tell you how weak they really are. Because it's not easy. And there are times when you don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to keep doing this. And for a very long time, the first thought of my head every morning was, I don't want to be here. Why am I here again? It was like that scene in Groundhog Day. You know, you wake up every day and you're like, why am I still here? So, you know, we do go through those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we sure do.
So let's talk about some of the stuff that you're doing, because you're doing amazing work. Your website is soulbodyconnect.com. And free gift to download there. People visit it. So what's the gift?
So it's a downloadable, and it's just tips on what to say and what to do and what not to say and what not to do when you're navigating grief, or when you're holding space for someone else that's navigating grief. And just simple ideas that are not so simple, actually. For instance, one of them is the whole idea of telling somebody, you know, just if you need anything, just call me, right?
Wow.
And that when I was the one, just having been impacted by this traumatic experience, I couldn't figure out what it is that I needed.
Yeah.
much less who could deliver that thing for me, much less the energy to pick up the phone and call and ask.
Right.
That was way too much for me.
Right.
And so there are a bunch of tips on that downloadable that kind of a little guide to how to be more compassionate.
Yeah, I think that's so important because people don't know what to say. They don't want to say the wrong thing. So often
they don't want to say the wrong things. And because they want to say the right things, they often don't say anything at all.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that also puts us in an awkward position.
Yeah.
And creates isolation too. And that's not the intention at all, because people come from a very beautiful intended space.
Right. And they don't want to bring up your boys because they don't want to make you sad. You know?
Yeah.
They don't want to make you think about them.
Yeah. I'm like, please ask me about my boys. I love talking about my boys. Why wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and tell me about your online Soul Sessions membership group.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So Soul Sessions is an online group. We meet twice a month on Zoom, and it's just for people who are navigating grief. I do not define what that grief impact was. It could be the death of a loved one. It could be a divorce. It could be a loss of sense of self. But we have themes, and I create and present some content, and we have a Q&A and a discussion. We also have lots of guest speakers. So perhaps, Brian, you'd like to be a guest speaker one day.
That sounds great. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I love that idea. I love the use, well, obviously I'm using Zoom to talk to you. People say, I don't like technology. I don't like social media. I love technology. I love social. I talk to people all over the world. I've made great friends, through using technology. You can bring people, face-to-face is great, but especially in grief, a lot of times people don't want to be face-to-face. They don't want to make the effort to get out of the house. They might cry, They can sit on a Zoom. They can be in their pajamas. They can turn off their camera.
It's great. It's great. And we all have our stories, and there are similar themes that go through those stories.
Yeah.
And so what has happened to us is unique. How we navigate that and different things that we have to navigate because of it are common. And so I find that common space that we can all talk about. And it's not group therapy. I'm not a therapist. I don't pretend to be a therapist. Mm-hmm. But I can coach. And we just walk that path together, and we try and strike the balance of how to grow from this experience. Where do we go from here? Mm-hmm. So that's what Soul Sessions is about.
That sounds really cool. I definitely want to check that out. And I know you have a retreat coming up in about a month or so.
Yeah, October 4th and 5th here in Roanoke, Virginia. It's called a Root to Rise retreat. And it's also on my website under soulbodyconnect.com/retreat. And we'll be working with the horses. So the same horses that I worked with that were so pivotal for me in my storylines, I'll be taking groups of people down to work with the horses, and then we'll be outside in nature, and we'll have a fire ceremony at the end of the night. Wow,
cool. So you also do private coaching, right? Mm-hmm. That's available through your website. And so also tell me about Qoya. That sounds fascinating. Is it like Tai Chi or something like that? Or
such a great question. It's a movement practice where we use movement as metaphor. And so it's based on the idea that through movement we remember. And we remember that we are wise, we are wild, and we are free. And through a Qoya class, you go on an internal pilgrimage, and you explore your relationship to whatever the theme is for that night. And sometimes the theme could be gratitude. The theme could be good grief. The theme could be listening to your own internal wisdom. And it's not dance therapy, but it is therapeutic. And a lot of people have these huge aha moments. And it was pivotal to me in my healing process as well. I became a Qoya teacher before our fire. And after the fire, I continued to lead Qoya retreats worldwide. Qoya's all over the globe. And I took people to Zimbabwe, and we worked with the animals and elephants there and the rhinos. And we went to Belize, we went to Costa Rica, and we also go to Asheville or Roanoke. So it's really all over the place, but we are a tribe of people that move our bodies and use our bodies as wise. We use physical sensation to explore how we feel about certain ideas or concepts, right? So we take what's going on up here in our head and we bring it into our body. Wow. So once you feel it, you know it, right? It is an infallible truth.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, so you've got a lot of things going on. You're I'm going to say it. You are inspirational. I just met you, like I said, a couple weeks ago. We just sat down and had a chat on Zoom, and I just found you to be fascinating. It's interesting. You said we do have unique experiences, but we do have a lot of things in common as well. Just as human beings, and to see, to hear your story. I hear so much of my own story in it. Seeing your boys, I see my girls and your boys. The little preparations that you had for this, I had from a different perspective, because for me, because of my great fear of death, that's what prepared me. I started doing all this research and having no idea humanly that this was going to happen to Shayna. But when it did happen with Shayna, one blessing I had was I knew she was okay. Just like you with your boys. It was never like, where did she go? I never had to have to deal with that. So I feel that was a big blessing for me.
Yeah, huge. Thank God for it.
Yeah. Well, Lindsay, anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
I'm just incredibly grateful for this time to spend with you, Brian, and to make this incredible connection that we found through helping parents heal, as well as our friend Devora. Yeah. And I'm just so grateful for the popcorn trail that I always follow, and it leads me to the most beautiful places and spaces. And I appreciate the time to just be transparent and have normal conversation, because death it can be scary, and it's also normal, and we don't normalize it in our culture. So thank you.
Well, it's another divine appointment. I mean, it's like, I just cannot believe all the things that have been happening. So when Devora said, I want you to meet a friend of mine, I'm like, okay, that's fine. And she didn't tell me much about you. And we had the conversation. I'm like, okay, I've got to get her on my podcast. As I tell people, we're all the same, and we're all unique. Yeah. So, and we're all amazing beyond what I think most of us realize. So I keep doing these podcasts. I keep meeting people. I'm like, wow, she's just an amazing person. She's just an amazing person. And you are. I mean, I'm so glad to have met you. So hopefully we'll stay in touch, and love to be a guest on your session someday.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. Lindsay, thanks a lot. I'm going to let you go, and have a good day.
All right. Thank you, Brian. You take care.
Bye. Well, that's it for another episode of Grief to Growth. This is your host, Brian Smith. I want to thank you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Feel free to reach out to me anytime at www.grieftogrowth.com. That's www.grief2growth.com. And you may know I am a life coach and grief partner. So if you'd like to schedule a free half-hour consultation and see how we might work together, you can do that on my website at grieftogrowth.com. Thanks a lot, and have a wonderful day. Hi there. I hope you enjoyed this latest episode of the podcast, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. What questions came up for you? What did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? I invite you to visit us at grieftogrowth.circle.so. That's growth2growth.circle.so to continue the conversation with me and with other listeners. It's a space to sound off, to share reactions, and to go deeper into the topics from the show. I look forward to chatting more, and I hope to see you there.